A Viking longship cuts through the icy waves, a symbol of legendary exploration. We all know the Norsemen reached North America around the year 1000. But what if they were merely the last chapter in a much older story? Today, we are going back much further to uncover 30 astonishing journeys into the ancient Arctic. You will discover a hidden history of lost cultures, impossible voyages, and artifacts emerging from the thawing ice. Who were the mysterious people who thrived in the eternal cold long before the Vikings? How did a precious piece of South American gold end up in the Canadian tundra? By the end, you will see the top of the world not as an empty wasteland, but as a stage for epic human drama for thousands of years. What forgotten explorer from the distant past most captures your curiosity? Our story begins not with ships, but with ice during the coldest chapter of the last ice age. 22,000 years ago, massive glaciers covered much of Europe and North America. The sea level was hundreds of feet lower, exposing vast coastal plains now lost to the ocean. In this stark, frozen world, a culture of remarkable hunters thrived in what is now southwestern France and Spain. These were the Solutrean people, master craftsmen known for their beautiful, leaf-shaped stone spear points, pressure-flaked with a skill that seemed to appear from nowhere. For decades, a small group of archaeologists have pointed to these artifacts and asked a radical question. What if these Ice Age Europeans did not just stay put? What if, against all odds, some of them ventured west across the Atlantic? This is the Solutrean hypothesis. It proposes that small bands of these hunters, living off the abundant marine life along the frozen edge of the North Atlantic ice sheet, slowly worked their way westward. They would have traveled in skin boats, hugging a coastline that is now deep underwater, following what scientists call a kelp highway. This rich marine ecosystem, full of fish, seals, and seabirds, could have provided a lifeline for a journey that spanned generations. The destination, according to this theory, was a new world. The most tantalizing piece of evidence lies in a tool-kit comparison. The distinctive, finely crafted spear points of the Solutreans bear a striking, some say uncanny, resemblance to the later Clovis points found across North America, which date to around 13,000 years ago. Both are thin, bifacial, and share sophisticated fluting techniques. To proponents, this similarity is not a coincidence, but a cultural blueprint carried across the ocean. The climatic reality of such a voyage is almost beyond comprehension. These explorers would have faced a perpetual twilight, navigating between the towering wall of the ice sheet and the open, stormy ocean. Their survival would have depended entirely on their intimate knowledge of the sea ice and the creatures that lived upon it. It was not a single, purposeful expedition, but a slow, incremental expansion, a relentless search for new hunting grounds along a frigid, unknown shore. They would have been among the hardiest humans to ever live. Yet, this theory is one of the most hotly contested ideas in modern archaeology. The majority of genetic evidence firmly points to the ancestors of all indigenous peoples in the Americas arriving from Siberia via the Bering Land Bridge. No Solutrean DNA has been found in ancient American remains. Critics argue the similarity in stone tools could be a case of independent invention, where different cultures in similar environments arrive at similar solutions. The academic debate has been, at times, fiercely personal, touching on sensitive questions of origins and identity. So, was there an Ice Age Atlantic crossing? The Solutrean hypothesis remains on the fringe, a bold and unproven idea, but it forces us to expand our imagination of what ancient humans were capable of. It presents the Arctic not as a barrier, but as a corridor, a challenging yet navigable highway for the most desperate or the most curious. It asks us to look at a beautifully crafted stone point and see not just a tool, but a potential passport to an impossible journey. Whether fact or compelling fiction, it serves as a powerful opening act, reminding us that the blank spaces on our ancient maps are often filled with stories waiting to be questioned. While the Solutrean hypothesis remains a ghost on the Atlantic's edge, the next explorers we meet left undeniable footprints in the snow. Far to the north, a culture of profound mystery mastered the Arctic for nearly 2,000 years. They are known as the Dorset, the true Thuniot of legend. Emerging around 500 years before the Common Era, these Paleo-Eskimo people spread across the vast, silent expanses of the Canadian Arctic and Greenland, building a civilization in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. Their world was one of profound isolation, a continent of ice they had entirely to themselves. What set them apart and makes them so fascinating to archaeologists is their unique and delicate material culture. While later Arctic peoples used bows and large harpoons, the Dorset toolkit was one of miniature precision. They crafted tiny, razor-sharp microblades, small harpoon heads, and delicate needles from bone and ivory, all speaking to a highly specialized way of life. But their true artistic signature is found in their carvings. From walrus ivory and driftwood, they shaped a spirit world into tangible form. They created haunting human faces, often with startled expressions, and beautiful, fluid sculptures of polar bears, seals, and mystical hybrid creatures. These were not mere decorations, they were likely powerful amulets, objects meant to connect the hunter with the soul of the animal, a vital relationship for survival on the frozen sea. Their survival strategy was a masterpiece of patience and observation. The Dorset were masters of the seal-breathing whole hunt. In the depths of the long polar winter, they would locate the holes seals maintain in the sea ice, then wait in utter stillness, sometimes for hours, harpoon in hand. When the seals surfaced for a breath, the strike had to be perfect. This technique required an incredible, intimate knowledge of sea ice conditions and animal behavior, a knowledge passed down through generations. They built semi-subterranean houses of stone and sod, warmed by small, efficient soapstone lamps that burned seal oil, creating pockets of warmth and light against the endless dark. Then, around the year 1500 of the Common Era, they vanished. Their disappearance coincides strikingly with the eastward expansion of a new people, the Thule, the direct ancestors of the modern Inuit. The Thule culture possessed superior technology, including large open-skin boats, dog sleds, and powerful bows that allowed them to hunt the massive bowhead whale. This was not necessarily a violent conquest, but it was likely an overwhelming displacement. The Dorset, so perfectly adapted to their specific niche, may have been unable to compete for resources or susceptible to diseases introduced by the newcomers. But they were not forgotten. Inuit oral history preserves their memory as the Thuniot, a people described as incredibly strong, tall, and gentle, yet shy and easily driven away. Stories tell of the Thuniot's great physical power, capable of lifting massive stones, but also of their simplicity, lacking the dogs and boats of the Inuit. In these tales, they are not enemies, but a former people who faded into the land. The Dorset stand as a testament to a different Arctic, a lonelier one, where a unique human culture flowered in silence for centuries. Their delicate carvings emerging from the permafrost are whispers from a lost world, reminding us that human history in the far north is a story of many chapters, many endings, and mysteries still held tight in the ice. The Dorset culture faded into silence, but the Arctic was about to witness an explosion of movement and innovation. From the west, a new force was gathering, one that would reshape the human map of the top of the world forever. Around the year 1000 of the Common Era, a cultural revolution began in the coastal regions of Alaska. This was the dawn of the Thule people, the direct ancestors of all modern Inuit. Their story is not one of quiet adaptation, but of breathtaking expansion, a migration so swift and successful it stands as one of the great human journeys. What fueled this epic movement? It was a perfect storm of revolutionary technology. The Thule did not just live in the Arctic, they engineered a way to master it. Their most iconic invention was the umiak, a large, open boat made from walrus or seal skins stretched over a wooden or bone frame. This was not a simple canoe, it was the moving van of the ancient Arctic. Capable of carrying entire families, their dogs, and all their possessions, the umiak turned the sea from a barrier into a highway. For hunting, they had the kayak, a sleek, one-person craft of incredible maneuverability, allowing a hunter to slip silently among ice floes. On land, the dog sled transformed travel. Harnessing the power of strong, hardy dogs, the Thule could transport heavy loads across the frozen landscape at speeds the Dorset could never match. But the true engine of their expansion was a new relationship with the largest creature in their world, the bowhead whale. While the Dorset hunted seals at breathing holes, the Thule looked to the open water. They developed sophisticated harpoons with detachable heads connected to floats made of inflated seal skins. A successful strike on a bowhead whale was a community event, a single hunt that could yield tens of thousands of pounds of meat and blubber, enough to feed a village for a year. This bonanza of energy and resources was the rocket fuel for their migration. With abundant food from whaling, their populations grew. With their large boats and sleds, they could travel farther and carry more. And so they moved eastward along the Arctic coast with astonishing speed. Within just a few centuries, Thule sites appear across the entire Canadian Arctic, all the way to Greenland. They did not find an empty land. This new territory was the ancient homeland of the Dorset, the people we just met. The arrival of the Thule set the stage for a profound cultural moment. Was this a violent conquest, a peaceful merging, or a slow displacement? The archaeological record suggests a complex reality. The Thule, with their superior technology for harvesting massive resources, simply occupied the ecological niche more effectively. They may have outcompeted the Dorset for key hunting grounds. There is little evidence of widespread warfare, but the demographic and cultural pressure would have been immense. The Dorset way of life, so specialized and isolated, likely could not withstand the arrival of this dynamic, resource-rich new society. Inuit oral histories sometimes speak of encountering the last of the Tuniat, describing fleeting interactions before the older people vanished into the landscape. The Thule expansion was less a discovery and more a transformation. They brought with them a resilient, adaptable culture perfectly suited to the Arctic's demands. Their rapid journey from Alaska to Greenland is a testament to human ingenuity in the face of extreme challenge, a story not of mere survival, but of ambitious conquest over the last great frontier of the ancient world. The Thule expansion was a story written in whalebone and sled tracks, but far to the south, in the warm waters of the Mediterranean, a different kind of Arctic story was being imagined. While the Inuit ancestors mastered the real Arctic, classical scholars tried to map its edges from rumor and report. Our understanding leaps from the archaeological ice to the fragile pages of ancient texts and to a man named Pytheas. Around the year 325 before the Common Era, this Greek explorer and astronomer from the colony of Massalia, modern-day Marseille, embarked on a journey that would become the stuff of legend. He sailed north beyond the known world of Britain and claimed after 6 days of travel to have reached a land he called Thule. Here he wrote of a place where the summer sun barely dipped below the horizon, creating a night of twilight. More mysteriously, he described a sea that became neither earth, air, nor water, but a congealed substance on which one could neither walk nor sail. To Mediterranean readers, this sounded like pure fantasy. Today, we recognize it as likely the first written description of the Arctic pack ice, or the thick, soupy sea ice known as pancake ice. So where was this Ultima Thule? Scholars have debated for centuries. It could have been the Shetland Islands, where the summer nights are indeed very short. It might have been the coast of Norway. Or just possibly, Pythe's account could describe a sighting of Iceland, a land that would not be permanently settled for another 1,000 years. His voyage proves that the far north was not a complete blank even to the classical world. It was a real place reachable by a determined sailor, and its bizarre conditions were recorded with the eye of a scientist. Pythe's account did not vanish. His descriptions filtered into the geographic knowledge of the Greco-Roman world, shaping their vision of the planet's northern rim. The great geographer Ptolemy, drawing on these older sources, depicted a frozen northern ocean on his world maps. This was not detailed knowledge, but a conceptual understanding that the world grew cold and impassable at its top. Furthermore, tantalizing physical clues suggest these were not just stories. Roman artifacts, including coins and bits of bronze, have been found scattered in places like Iceland and Scandinavia. These objects likely did not arrive via a Roman expedition to the Arctic. Instead, they moved slowly north through long, branching chains of trade and gift exchange, passed from tribe to tribe over vast distances. A Roman coin in a Scandinavian bog is not proof of a legionnaire in the tundra, but it is proof of a network, a slow drip of southern goods, and with them, southern stories. The tales of a frozen sea and a midnight sun were thus woven into the classical worldview, a mixture of hard fact and exaggerated myth. This created a fascinating duality. For the Thule people, the Arctic was home, a practical reality of survival. For the Greeks and Romans, it was the edge of the map, a realm of monstrous legends and natural wonders, conceptually frozen long before any explorer ever set foot there. This classical vision of the North as a mysterious, barely habitable limit would echo down through the centuries, influencing medieval cartographers and later explorers who, unlike Pytheas, had forgotten that the ice was real. The classical world saw the Arctic as a distant rumor, but across the globe, another sophisticated civilization was also looking north. Ancient Chinese scholars, gazing from their ordered empire, recorded strange whispers of a frozen realm at the edge of the world. The earliest and most mysterious of these hints comes from a text called the Shanhai Jing, the classic of mountains and seas. Compiled over centuries, this fantastical work is a mix of geography, mythology, and bizarre zoology. Within its pages are descriptions of lands far to the north where it is said, the sun does not set for half the year and a great sea is frozen solid. To the Chinese scribes, these were likely tales of the incomprehensible, recorded with a mix of awe and skepticism. Yet, stripped of their mythical creatures, the core observations align eerily with the Arctic reality of the midnight sun and the pack ice. It was not a travelogue, but a compilation of frontier knowledge, suggesting that information about the far north was filtering south along trade routes, morphing into legend by the time it reached the imperial court. Centuries later, more grounded accounts emerged from the journeys of Buddhist pilgrims. A monk named Faxian, who traveled to India in the early 5th century to retrieve sacred texts, wrote of his return voyage by sea. While his primary route was through Southeast Asia, his writings and those of later pilgrims occasionally mention the distant northern regions, often called the land of the ice mountains. These were not destinations, but perilous landmarks referenced by sailors and traders, places of eternal cold that marked the absolute limit of the known world. The pilgrims' records treated these northern realms with spiritual significance, sometimes considering them the abode of ascetics or mythical beings. They reinforced the idea that China's awareness of the Arctic was intellectual and second-hand, a concept drawn from maps and merchant stories rather than direct exploration. Then the evidence shifts from text to artifact, and the story becomes startlingly tangible. During the powerful Tang dynasty, around the 7th to 9th centuries, Chinese goods began appearing in the most unexpected place, Alaska. At archaeological sites on the shores of the Bering Sea, excavators have uncovered fragments of Chinese bronze mirrors and distinctive silk textiles. These are not generic trade goods that could have trickled across continents over millennia. They are specific, datable items from the height of Tang culture. How did they get there? The most compelling theory points not to a direct epic voyage from China to Alaska, but to a long, patient chain of contact. The Aleutian Islands string across the North Pacific like a series of stepping stones. It is entirely plausible that goods and ideas moved along this chain, passed from community to community through trade, marriage, or ritual exchange. A Chinese mirror could have traveled from a Tang port to Korea, then to the islands of Japan, to the indigenous peoples of the Kuril Islands, and finally across the Aleutians to mainland Alaska over the course of generations. This was not an expedition in the European sense, but a slow cultural diffusion across the roof of the Pacific. Some scholars even suggest more direct, if occasional, contact. Tang records occasionally mention diplomatic interactions with peoples from the northeast, descriptions that could possibly refer to groups from across the Bering Strait. While no Chinese ship's log detailing an Arctic voyage has ever been found, the physical evidence is undeniable. These silks and mirrors prove that the vast Pacific was not an absolute barrier. Long before European dreams of a Northwest Passage, a different kind of connection existed, one that moved in increments, linking the great empire of the East with the hunter-gatherer civilizations of the far Northwest. It paints a picture of a pre-modern world that was far more interconnected than we often assume, where a piece of finery from a Tang workshop could end up as a prized heirloom in an Alaskan coastal village, a silent witness to a forgotten bridge across the top of the world. A Chinese mirror in Alaska whispers of connections across the Pacific, but across the Atlantic, an even older legend speaks of a deliberate journey into the unknown. In the misty monasteries of 6th century Ireland, a story was born that would captivate Europe for 1,000 years. It is the tale of Saint Brendan, an abbot who supposedly set sail with a crew of monks in a small boat made of wood and animal hides, seeking a promised land of saints across the Western Ocean. His chronicle, the Navigatio Sancti Brendani, reads like a medieval fantasy. It describes an island covered in giant sheep, a floating crystal pillar, and an encounter with a sea monster so vast they mistook it for an island and celebrated Mass on its back. For centuries, these wonders were taken as pure religious allegory, a spiritual journey dressed as a travelogue. Yet, buried within the pious exaggerations and mythical creatures, there is a skeleton of startling geographic reality. The narrative describes a voyage that follows a very specific path. After leaving Ireland, Brendan and his monks first reach the island of Sheep, which many scholars identify as the Faroe Islands, still famous for their flocks. Next, they land at a fiery island where blacksmiths throw slag into the sea, a perfect description of a volcanic eruption, likely on Iceland. From there, the text mentions sailing through dense fog and encountering massive icebergs which could place them in the waters near Greenland. The final destination, the land promised to the saints, is described as lush and bountiful. Could this have been a fog-shrouded coastline of Newfoundland, a place the monks, in their religious fervor, believed they had been divinely guided to find? The core of the story is deeply plausible. Irish monks of this era were renowned for their seafaring penitence, seeking solitude on remote islands. They used vessels called currachs, lightweight frames of ash wood covered in ox hide, waterproofed with animal fat. These boats were remarkably seaworthy, capable of long voyages across the North Atlantic's often treacherous waters. They were exploring for God, not for glory or trade, driven by a desire to find the ultimate hermitage at the edge of the world. The legend of Saint Brendan lingered for centuries as a beautiful myth, until one man decided to test it with his own hands. In 1976, explorer and historian Tim Severin constructed a replica currach using only materials and methods available in Brendan's time. He named it the Brendan, and with a small crew, he set out to follow the saints' described route. Their journey was not a mere stunt, it was a rigorous experiment in historical navigation. They sailed from Ireland to the Faroes, then to Iceland, and finally across the Denmark Strait to the coast of Newfoundland. The voyage was arduous and perilous, but they proved something monumental. A leather boat could survive the Atlantic. It could withstand the pounding waves, and the hide, constantly soaked, did not rot but became tougher. Severin's crew even encountered whales that nudged the boat gently, much like the legendary sea monster, and they navigated through the same ice fields described in the ancient text. Severin did not claim to have found proof that St. Brendan reached America, but he proved beyond doubt that the journey described was technologically possible for 6th century monks. The Brendan voyage transforms the legend. It suggests that the navigatio is not pure fiction, but a folk memory, a real account of exploration that was later embellished with spiritual symbolism. A group of monks may indeed have ventured incredibly far west, experiencing wonders like volcanoes and icebergs that, to them, could only be explained as divine miracles. Their story, passed down orally for generations before being written, became a map overlaid with faith. So was St. Brendan the first European to see the New World. We may never have archaeological proof from a monastic campsite on a Newfoundland beach, but the story stands as a powerful testament to human courage and curiosity, framed not by conquest but by a search for sacred solitude. It represents a different kind of Arctic exploration, one undertaken not by warriors or traders, but by prayerful men in tiny boats of leather, who may have accidentally written the first faint draft of a transatlantic discovery that would not be fully realized for another 500 years. St. Brendan's voyage remains a tantalizing maybe, but the next chapter in this story is written in stone and bone. On the rugged shores of Greenland, the Vikings planted a flag in the Arctic. This was not a fleeting visit, but a colony meant to last, a bold declaration that the Norse could carve a European life from the edge of the ice. The architect of this audacious venture was Eric the Red, a man whose name tells you everything you need to know about his temperament. Exiled from Iceland for murder, he sailed west around the year 985, discovering a massive fjord-cut landmass. With a marketer's flair, he called it Greenland, hoping the appealing name would lure settlers. And it worked. Hundreds followed him across the treacherous Denmark Strait to establish two main communities, the Eastern Settlement and the smaller Western Settlement. These were not military outposts but farming communities. The settlers built stone and turf longhouses modeled on their Scandinavian homes with central hearths to fight the bitter cold. They constructed churches, the most famous being H. Valsey, whose stone walls still stand stark against the sky today. They raised cattle, sheep, and goats, practicing a pastoral lifestyle that was fundamentally European. But Greenland was not Scandinavia. The growing season was brutally short, and the climate, though slightly warmer during the medieval warm period, was still a harsh subarctic reality. To survive, and more importantly to thrive, the Norse had to adapt. Their economy became a hybrid. The farm provided dairy and wool, but true wealth came from the hunt. They ventured north into the true Arctic waters of what they called the Nordesetter, the northern hunting grounds. There they hunted walrus, a creature whose ivory tusks were as valuable as gold in medieval Europe. Walrus ivory was used for exquisite religious carvings, for chess pieces, for the finest decorative items in royal courts. This trade was Greenland's lifeline. Ships would arrive from Norway, bringing iron, timber, and grain, and leave laden with tusks, walrus hide ropes, and even live polar bears, which were coveted as royal gifts. For nearly 500 years, this remote society persisted, a European toehold in the high latitudes. But this story is not just about endurance. Greenland's true significance in our mystery is as a launch pad. From these fjords, stocked with provisions and manned by sailors already hardened to northern seas, the next logical step was to look even further west. The Greenland settlements were the essential supply depot, the base camp for the most famous explorations to come. They provided the security and resources that made longer voyages conceivable. So when we hear of Leif Erikson sailing to a land of vines he called Vinland, we must remember he did not sail from Norway or even Iceland. He sailed from Greenland. His journey and those that followed were extensions of this Arctic foothold. The Norse in Greenland were not just settlers at the world's edge, they were pioneers standing on a new continent's doorstep, their eyes fixed on horizons yet unknown. But the story of Vinland begins not with Leif Erikson, but with a man who saw a new world and deliberately turned away. In the year 986, a merchant captain named Bjarni Herjolfsson set sail from Iceland, bound for the new settlement in Greenland where his father had gone with Eric the Red. He was a practical man, a trader focused on his cargo and destination. The voyage should have been straightforward, following the known route across the Denmark Strait. Instead, his ship was enveloped by a dense, persistent fog, a common and terrifying hazard of the North Atlantic. For days, they drifted blindly, utterly lost. When the mist finally cleared, the sun revealed a shocking sight. Before them was not the barren, glacier-scraped coast of Greenland, but a land of low, forested hills. This was a landscape of timber, a resource more precious than silver in the treeless Arctic colonies. His crew, surely exhausted and relieved, urged him to go ashore. They could gather fresh water, repair the ship, and explore this unexpected haven, but Bjarni refused. He was a man of singular purpose. His mission was to reach his father in Greenland, and this was not Greenland. He gave orders to turn the ship back out to sea, to continue north. They sailed along this mysterious coast for a time, seeing only more forest and gentle slopes before Bjarni finally turned eastward. After more sailing, they eventually spotted the high, icy mountains that marked their intended destination. Bjarni Herjolfsson had become the first European to reliably lay eyes on the North American continent, and he had chosen not to set foot on it. For this, he was later criticized in the sagas, his caution framed as a lack of curiosity or even courage. But this judgment misses the profound significance of his decision. Bjarni was not an explorer, he was a navigator. His responsibility was to his crew and his cargo, not to unknown shores. By prioritizing his original mission, he accomplished something extraordinary. He brought back a detailed, factual report. He described what he had seen, a wooded land lying to the west of Greenland. This was not a sailor's tall tale of sea monsters or golden cities. It was a sober, credible account from a respected captain. That report would simmer in the Norse settlements for 15 years, a seed of possibility. It reached the ears of a young man named Leif Erikson, who recognized its value not as a missed opportunity, but as a map. Leif would later seek out Bjarni, buy his ship, and hire his crew, using their first-hand knowledge to plot his own course. Bjarni's accidental discovery was the essential catalyst. Without his sighting and his precise description, Leif's famous voyage to Vinland might never have happened, or it might have been a blind search into an empty ocean. Bjarni Herjolfsson, the man who turned away, is the unsung prologue to America's Viking chapter, a reminder that discovery is not always about the first footprint, but sometimes about the first reliable account that makes all future journeys possible. Leif Erikson did not just hear a story, he saw a blueprint. Around the year 1000, equipped with Bjarni Herjolfsson's ship and his crew's memory, Leif set out to do what the merchant had not. He sailed west from Greenland with a clear purpose, to explore the lands Bjarni had glimpsed and chart them for himself. His voyage was a methodical retracing in reverse, a filling in of the map. The first coastline he reached was a barren, flat land of stone slabs. He called it Helluland, the land of flat stones. Today, we know it as Baffin Island, a stark Arctic landscape that matched his description perfectly. Sailing south, the scenery transformed. The next shore was heavily forested, a seemingly endless expanse of timber. Leif named it Markland, simply meaning woodland. This was almost certainly the coast of Labrador, a place where trees, a scarce treasure in Greenland, grew in unimaginable abundance. But Leif pressed on, driven by the promise of something more. Finally, his crew made landfall at a place of surpassing beauty. The sagas describe a gentle climate, lush grasslands, and rivers teeming with salmon. Most importantly, they found what Leif was searching for: vines and grapes growing wild. He named this place Vinland. This was not a permanent home he sought to build, but a resource base, a seasonal camp where Greenlanders could gather the two things they needed most: high-quality lumber for building and ship repair, and the valuable grapes for making wine. The settlement was small, perhaps housing around 80 people at its peak, and it was used for only a few years before being abandoned. For centuries, Vinland existed only in the pages of the Icelandic sagas, a compelling but unproven legend. That changed in the 1960s when a Norwegian explorer named Helge Ingstad and his archaeologist wife, Anne Stein Ingstad, followed a hunch to a remote fishing village at the northern tip of Newfoundland. The place was called Elance Ox Meadows. There, under the grassy mounds, they uncovered the undeniable proof: the foundations of 8 Norse-style buildings. These were not native structures. They were classic Viking longhouses with their characteristic bowed walls, built of sod over a timber frame, identical to those found in Iceland and Greenland. But the site offered more than just footprints. The archaeologists found a bronze cloak pin, a stone lamp, and a small spindle whorl used for spinning wool, all of Norse design. Most conclusively, they uncovered the remains of an iron smithy, with a simple forge and piles of slag, the waste from smelting bog iron. This was a technological signature. The indigenous peoples of the region at that time did not smelt iron. This was a distinctly European process. Elance Ox Meadows is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it stands as the first and only confirmed Norse settlement in North America. It was not a colony meant to last generations, but a strategic base camp, a workshop and way station for explorers venturing further into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. It proves the sagas were not mere fiction. They were history dressed in epic poetry. Leif Eriksson's voyage represents the pinnacle of Norse Arctic exploration, a journey that connected the frozen outpost of Greenland to the temperate shores of a new world. It was a definitive milestone, a moment when the ancient Arctic corridor led not to another icy shore, but to a continent of unimaginable possibility. Elance Ox Meadows was a base camp, but the Norse dream was far grander. The most ambitious attempt to plant a permanent European colony in the New World belongs not to Leif, but to an Icelander named Thorfinn Karlsefni. Around the year 1010, he organized a true migration fleet. This was not a crew of explorers, but a community. 3 ships carried around 160 men and women, along with a cargo of hope and practicality, livestock including cattle and sheep. Their goal was to build a self-sustaining settlement in Vinland, to create a new Norse society across the sea. For a time, it seemed possible. The sagas describe a promising first winter with no shortage of food from the land and sea. Then, the new arrivals encountered the true owners of the land, people the Norse called the Skraelings. This Old Norse word is often translated as wretches or weaklings, a term dripping with cultural contempt, but it likely referred to the indigenous peoples they met, possibly the Beothuk of Newfoundland or even Dorset descendants. The first interactions were not hostile but curious and commercial. The Skraelings arrived in skin boats, eager to trade. They offered furs and pelts, and in return, the Norse showed them milk, cheese, and butter. The indigenous traders were fascinated by these dairy products, a food source utterly unknown to them. They eagerly traded vast bundles of valuable furs for simple strips of red cloth the Norse offered, a color that likely held significant meaning in their own culture. This was a moment of fragile potential, a crossroads where two worlds could have learned from each other, but the foundation was built on misunderstanding and mutual suspicion. The Norse, farmers and pastoralists at heart, saw the land as something to be claimed and shaped. Their very presence, with their grazing livestock and permanent structures, was an encroachment. The Skraelings, likely hunter-gatherers, saw the newcomers as competitors for resources and as unpredictable strangers. The peace shattered over something trivial yet explosive: a bull. According to the sagas, a Norse bull, startled or enraged, broke from its pen and charged bellowing into the woods. The terrifying sound and sight of this unknown, massive creature panicked a group of Skraelings who fled back to their own people. This single incident may have been interpreted not as an accident, but as a deliberate act of aggression or sorcery. Soon after, a large force returned, not to trade but to fight. The battles that followed were small in scale but decisive in outcome. The Norse, with their iron weapons and armor, held a technological advantage, yet they were vastly outnumbered and fighting in an unfamiliar landscape. The sagas recount a pivotal moment where Freydis, a fierce and ruthless woman related to Eric the Red, seized a sword from a fallen comrade, tore open her own shirt, and beat the blade against her bare chest while screaming at the attackers. This shocking act of defiance so startled the Skraelings that they retreated, but the psychological damage was done. The Norse realized they were not just visitors, they were targets. Every venture for timber, every fishing trip was now shadowed by the threat of ambush. The dream of a peaceful colony crumbled under the weight of constant fear and hostility. After just 2 or 3 years, Thorfinn Karlsefni made the only rational decision. He gathered his people, loaded the ships with whatever they could carry, and abandoned the settlement. They sailed back to Greenland, their great experiment a failure. This marked the definitive end of Norse ambitions for a North American colony. The combination of relentless conflict and the sheer psychological strain of living in a state of siege, far from any hope of reinforcement, proved insurmountable. They had the technology to reach Vinland, but not the numbers, the diplomacy, or the social flexibility to hold it. The door to the New World, opened so boldly by Leif Erikson, was now closed, leaving only ghostly longhouse foundations and a saga that tells of ambition, fear, and a fleeting chance for a different history that vanished into the northern mist. The dream of Vinland faded, but the Greenland Norse still faced a harsh economic reality. Their survival depended on a commodity colder and more distant than any vineyard: walrus ivory. To secure it, hunters embarked on journeys far more perilous than the Atlantic crossing, deep into the true high Arctic. Each summer, crews would sail north from the settlements, venturing beyond the last fjords into a world of stark, endless light. Their destination was a region they called the Nordersetter, the Northern Hunting Grounds, a vast and unforgiving stretch of the Canadian Arctic encompassing parts of modern-day Baffin, Devon, and Ellesmere Islands. This was not a land for farming or settlement, but a seasonal resource frontier, a factory of ice and ivory. The archaeological proof of these incredible expeditions lay hidden for centuries. On the remote shores of Ellesmere Island, just a few hundred miles from the North Pole, researchers have made startling finds. Among the stones and snow, they have uncovered fragments of chainmail armor, rusted but recognizable. They have found pieces of worked wood carved in a distinctly Norse style, and the outlines of small, temporary shelters built not in the Inuit fashion, but with the familiar Norse post and sod technique. These are not the remains of a lost colony, but of hunting camps occupied for perhaps a few weeks each year by small, tough crews. The purpose of these grueling trips was brutally clear. The walrus herds that gathered on the rocky beaches of the high Arctic were a treasure trove on the hoof. Their ivory tusks were the economic engine of Norse Greenland, more valuable than fur or even timber. In medieval Europe, walrus ivory was the material of choice for the most exquisite religious art, for intricate carvings on altarpieces, and for luxury items like gaming pieces and knife handles. A single successful hunt could yield enough ivory to trade for a year's supply of essential goods from Norway: iron for tools, timber for boat repair, and grain for bread. But the hunt did not stop at walrus. The Norse also pursued the narwhal, that strange Arctic whale with a long, spiraled tusk. In Europe, these tusks were not sold as narwhal horn. They were marketed as the genuine horns of unicorns, mythical creatures of purity and power. A unicorn horn was worth a literal king's ransom, believed to have magical properties to detect poison and cure illness. It was the ultimate luxury good, destined for the treasuries of popes and emperors. The hunters also sought live polar bears, capturing the majestic white cubs to send back as extraordinary gifts for European royalty. A polar bear in a royal menagerie was a symbol of a king's reach to the very ends of the earth. These Norse hunters were the true, unsung Arctic explorers. While the sagas celebrated the voyages to Vinland, it was these annual treks into the midnight sun that defined the colony's harsh existence. They operated at the absolute limit of human endurance, in small, open boats amidst drifting ice floes and sudden storms. They were not seeking new lands to settle, but specific, deadly prey that meant the difference between prosperity and starvation for their community back home. Their camps on Ellesmere Island represent the northernmost footprint of European culture for over 500 years, a testament to a desperate, driven form of exploration where economics, not empire, was the compass. While Norse hunters tested their limits on the ice, a different kind of record was being crafted back in Norway, one that sought to make sense of their distant world. In the royal courts of the 13th century, a father sat down to instruct his son, not just on manners or warfare, but on the farthest reaches of the known earth. Their conversation became the Konung Skuggsjaw, the King's Mirror, a masterpiece of medieval wisdom and one of our most vivid windows into the Norse Arctic mind. This was not a saga of heroes, but a textbook for a future ruler, a systematic guide to geography, trade, and natural philosophy. Its pages treat Greenland and Iceland not as mythic frontiers, but as real, reportable provinces of the Norse world, places a well-informed king should understand. The text describes Greenland with a merchant's eye, noting its exports of walrus ivory, hide, and rope, and the treacherous sailing conditions around its coast. But then the father's voice turns to wonder. He explains the midnight sun, that strange phenomenon where, in the far north, day lasts through what should be night. He does not call it magic, but a natural fact, a function of the sun's path. More spectacular is his description of the northern lights. He calls them fires, explaining that the ice and frost of Greenland's interior gather so much force that they glow, casting their radiance into the sky. To us, it is a poetic misunderstanding of the aurora borealis, but to a medieval thinker, it was a logical theory, an attempt to explain the inexplicable using the elements he knew, ice and fire. The King's Mirror also offers brutally practical advice for sailors, knowledge hard-won from generations of Arctic voyagers. It warns of the sea ice, describing how to spot the ominous greenish reflection on clouds that signals its presence far ahead, a crucial skill to avoid being trapped. It details the different types of ice, from the great mountainous bergs to the flat, drifting pack. This was survival data passed from captain to captain, now codified in ink for a prince's education. What makes this text so compelling is its layered perspective. It sits at a crossroads. It records the direct, empirical observations of Norse sailors, the men who had seen the grinding ice up close. Yet it filters these observations through the lens of classical learning and biblical tradition still dominant in medieval scholarship. The result is a unique blend, a document where accurate sailing directions coexist with tales of monsters at the edge of the world, where the economic value of a walrus tusk is discussed alongside speculative theories about the nature of the heavens. The King's Mirror does more than describe, it systematizes. It takes the scattered stories of hunters, the logs of traders, and the fears of sailors, and weaves them into a coherent body of knowledge meant for preservation and instruction. This act of writing it down transformed oral, practical experience into formalized learning. It shows us that the Norse understanding of the Arctic was not just a collection of survival tips, but a considered geography, a subject worthy of study in a royal court. It captures a moment when the far north was being pulled from the realm of pure adventure into the realm of understood, if still awe-inspiring, fact. The father teaching his son from its pages was ensuring that the hard lessons of the ice and its breathtaking wonders would not be forgotten. The king's mirror preserved their knowledge, but it could not save their homes. In the middle of the 14th century, a profound silence fell over the western settlement of Greenland. This smaller, more northerly of the two Norse communities simply ceased to exist. There was no grand chronicle of its end, no final battle recorded in the sagas. One day, people were there tending their farms in the fjords, and the next they were gone forever. The mystery of their disappearance is one of the Arctic's coldest cases. When archaeologists excavate the farmsteads of the western settlement, they find a scene frozen in eerie normalcy and then sudden abandonment. In one house, the bones of a hunting dog were found beneath the collapsed roof, still wearing its collar. In another, a set of carpenter's tools lay neatly on a bench, as if the owner had just stepped outside and never returned. There are no mass graves, no signs of catastrophic fire or violent destruction. It is as though the entire population simply walked away, leaving their lives behind. What could have compelled an entire community to vanish? The leading suspect is a change in the very climate that had once sustained them. The period known as the Little Ice Age was beginning, a centuries-long cooling that gripped the North Atlantic. Summers grew shorter and colder, winters longer and more severe. For a society whose economy was balanced on a knife's edge, dependent on a short growing season to feed cattle and produce hay, this shift was catastrophic. The pasture land shrank, and sea ice would have blocked the crucial shipping lanes for longer periods, isolating them from trade and supplies. The land itself was turning against them. At the same time, new neighbors were arriving. The Thule Inuit, ancestors of the modern Inuit, were expanding their territory eastward along the Arctic coast. These master adapters, with their superior technology for hunting on the sea ice, thrived in the very conditions that were crippling the Norse. While the Norse starved in their stone houses, the Inuit hunted seals and whales from their kayaks and umiaks. Did conflict arise? There is little direct archaeological evidence of warfare, but the potential for tension over dwindling resources, especially the vital walrus hunting grounds, was immense. The Norse, clinging to their European identity, may have seen the Inuit not as partners for survival, but as competitors and strangers. Their own economy was crumbling from another direction. Back in Europe, the market for their primary export, walrus ivory, was collapsing. African elephant ivory, arriving through Mediterranean trade routes, became the preferred material. It was larger, easier to carve, and more fashionable. The Greenlandic trade, always perilous and expensive, was no longer worth the risk for Norwegian merchants. The lifeline was cut, faced with a trifecta of disaster: a failing climate, new competitors, and a worthless economy. What choices remained? Some may have slowly migrated back to Iceland or to the larger, slightly more resilient eastern settlement. Others, perhaps the last holdouts, could have simply dwindled, succumbing to malnutrition, disease, and despair. Their disappearance was not a single event, but a slow unraveling, a community fading into the long Arctic twilight. The end of the Western settlement marks more than a historical footnote. It is the closing of the Norse Arctic frontier. It stands as a stark, cautionary tale of a society that reached incredible heights of exploration, yet ultimately failed to adapt to a world that changed around them. They mastered the voyage across the ocean, but could not master the changing rhythms of their own frozen home. Gold from a tropical riverbed should not lie buried in the Canadian tundra. Yet that is the startling reality behind one of the most perplexing artifacts ever pulled from the Arctic soil. Far from the known world of Norse voyages, a different kind of mystery emerges, one that stretches a thread of connection across the entire Western Hemisphere. This is the story of the Zenu, a pre-Columbian culture of master goldsmiths who flourished in what is now northern Colombia from around 200 years before the Common Era until the Spanish conquest in the 16th century. Their homeland was a landscape of rivers and wetlands, a world away from ice and permafrost. The Zenu were not explorers in the traditional sense, but their artistic legacy traveled farther than they likely ever dreamed. Archaeologists working in the Canadian Arctic have uncovered small, intricate gold artifacts that bear the unmistakable stylistic hallmarks of Zenu craftsmanship. These are not generic lumps of precious metal, they are specific cultural objects, perhaps pendants or amulets, crafted with techniques and designs unique to that South American culture. The immediate question is as obvious as it is baffling. How did gold from the mountains of Colombia end up thousands of miles north, buried near the Arctic Circle? The most widely accepted and still astounding explanation is the continent-spanning indigenous trade network. We must discard the modern map with its borders and empty wilderness. Pre-Columbian America was crisscrossed by ancient highways of exchange, routes along which materials, ideas, and finished goods moved for thousands of years. Obsidian from Wyoming found its way to Ohio. Copper from the Great Lakes reached the Gulf of Mexico. Seashells from the Pacific coast were worn in ceremonies on the Atlantic shore. This was a slow, patient relay system. A Zenu gold ornament might have been traded to a neighboring group in exchange for rare feathers or gems. That group might later trade it northward to another community for fine pottery or obsidian. Over generations, perhaps centuries, the object could have passed through countless hands, moving incrementally up through Central America, across the vast trade hubs of Mesoamerica, and then northward along the interconnected networks of what is now the United States and Canada. Eventually, it could have reached the subarctic tribes, who then traded it further north to the ancestors of the Inuit or other Arctic peoples. Each trade was a social transaction, a bond formed, a gift given. The gold's value would have transformed with each exchange, less about its material worth and more about its rarity, its beauty, its power as an object from an impossibly distant and likely mythical world. The sheer distance is mind-boggling, but it is not impossible. It demonstrates that the Americas were deeply interconnected long before European contact. There is, however, a more speculative possibility, one that pushes the boundaries of accepted history. Could there have been, on rare occasions, direct maritime contact? The Zenu were a riverine people skilled with boats. Could a group, by chance or design, have been pushed by currents or storms into the Caribbean Sea and northward? Could they have island-hopped or been picked up by other seafaring cultures, eventually making their way along the Gulf Stream? It is a tantalizing thought, but it remains firmly in the realm of fringe theory. No evidence of South American boats or settlements exists in the north, and such a voyage would have been a monumental and likely accidental feat. The trade network theory is far more robust. The true power of this Arctic gold is not in proving a lost voyage, but in shattering our perception of isolation. That small, glittering object is a pin on a map of staggering human interaction. It proves that an item could journey from the heart of the tropics to the roof of the world, passing through dozens of cultures and languages along the way. It means that knowledge, however fragmented, of lush, gold-rich lands to the far south could have existed at the Arctic's edge. Stories of distant peoples who worked magic with sunlight metal might have been told around fires in the long winter dark, weaving a thread of wonder that connected the entire hemisphere long before any single explorer claimed to have discovered it. Gold from Colombia whispers of ancient highways across the land, but what about the open ocean? Far to the south and west, a different seafaring people were performing navigational miracles that may have woven another thread into this global tapestry. The Polynesians, masters of the Pacific, explored and settled islands across an ocean realm larger than all the continents combined. Their double-hulled voyaging canoes, guided by stars, swells, and the flight paths of birds, represent one of humanity's greatest adventures. And a single, humble plant suggests their story might have reached the Americas long before anyone expected. That plant is the sweet potato. Its scientific name, Ipomoea batatas, originates in South America, where it was first domesticated. Yet, when European explorers first reached Polynesian islands like Hawaii and Easter Island, they found the sweet potato already growing there. Crucially, the Polynesian word for it, kumara, bears a striking resemblance to the Quechua word from the Andes, kayuma. This is not a coincidence easily explained by wind or ocean currents carrying a wild seed. This is strong, though debated, evidence that people carried this vital crop across thousands of miles of open ocean. The question is who brought it and from which direction. The prevailing theory is that Polynesian voyagers, perhaps blown off course or deliberately exploring eastward, reached the coast of South America. There they encountered the sweet potato, recognized its value as a durable, nutritious voyage food, and brought it back to their island homes. This contact, however brief, would have been a monumental event. But could their exploration have reached even farther north? Some researchers look to the Pacific Northwest, to the rich cultures of the Tlingit, Haida, and others. They point to intriguing parallels. The complex fishhooks and harpoon points used by Northwest Coast peoples show similarities in design to Polynesian examples. More compelling are the boats, the large ocean-going canoes of the Northwest, carved from single massive cedar logs, share functional principles with Polynesian vessels, like raised bows for tackling open ocean swell. While these similarities could be independent inventions, smart solutions to similar problems, they fuel a fascinating speculation. Could a Polynesian voyaging canoe, riding the North Pacific currents, have made landfall on the misty shores of British Columbia or even southern Alaska? It is a breathtaking thought. A vessel from the tropical Pacific, its crew sustained by dried fish and sweet potato, encountering the towering temperate rainforests and the rich, cold waters of the north. Direct evidence remains elusive. No Polynesian artifact has been conclusively found on North American shores. The linguistic connections beyond Kumara are tenuous. And the climate difference between the Polynesian homeland and the Alaskan coast is so extreme that a prolonged stay or a deliberate colonization attempt seems improbable. Yet the possibility of a single, accidental voyage cannot be entirely dismissed. The ocean currents and winds could theoretically carry a disabled or lost canoe on a one-way trip to the northeast. Such an event would have been a catastrophe for the Polynesian crew, but a world-altering moment of contact for any who survived. This hypothesis, while on the fringes of archaeology, forces us to reimagine the Pacific not as a void but as a potential bridge. It suggests that the incredible navigational network of the Polynesians might have, at its farthest fraying edges, brushed against the Americas at 2 points, the sweet potato in the south and a ghost of a possibility in the north. It paints a picture of an ancient world where the oceans were not barriers, but highways for the most audacious explorers, creating a web of connections so vast and subtle that we are only now beginning to trace its faintest outlines. Deep in the humid jungles of Mesoamerica, the Olmec carved their world from stone. Between 1500 and 400 years before the Common Era, this mother culture of the Americas erected colossal stone heads and built complex ceremonial centers. Among all materials, they held one in the highest esteem, a smooth, cool stone the color of deep water or lush leaves. This was jade to the Olmec. Jade was not merely beautiful, it was sacred, a symbol of life, fertility, and the very essence of water and maize. They sourced this precious material from quarries in the Motagua River Valley of Guatemala, over 1,000 kilometers from their heartland. The difficulty of obtaining it only increased its value, transforming it into a substance of elite power and spiritual significance, shaped into exquisite celts, figurines, and ornaments. Now hold that image of a green Olmec jewel glinting in the tropical sun. Then let your mind travel thousands of miles north to the windswept coasts of Alaska. In archaeological sites here, amidst tools of bone and slate, researchers have uncovered something that should not exist in this frozen landscape: worked jade artifacts and even raw chunks of the distinctive stone. The green stone of the jungle had somehow reached the roof of the world. How is this possible? This is not a story of Olmec explorers hauling canoes into the Arctic Circle. It is a far more profound testament to the interconnectedness of the ancient Americas. The journey of this jade was almost certainly a slow, incremental relay up the Pacific coastline. Imagine a piece of raw jade, perhaps a small boulder, traded from the Olmec or their neighbors to a coastal group further north. It moves hand to hand, village to village, over generations. It might travel by raft along the shore or be carried inland and then back to the coast through intricate networks of trails and relationships. Each exchange imbues the stone with new stories and value. A people in what is now California might prize it for its hardness, crafting it into adzes. Further north, a community in the Pacific Northwest might see its color as spiritually significant, linking it to the sea or the forest. By the time it reaches the Alaskan shores, its origin in the distant southern jungles may have been forgotten, transformed into legend, but its inherent value remained. This movement was not a commercial trade route in the modern sense, but a social one. Jade, like the Arctic gold from Colombia, moved through gift-giving, marriage alliances, and ceremonial exchange. Its passage required a continent of stable, interacting cultures, a chain of human connection that remained unbroken for millennia. The presence of Mesoamerican jade in Alaska shatters the illusion of an isolated Arctic. It proves that the far north was not a dead end, but a participant in a vast, silent conversation that flowed along the western edge of the continents. The Arctic did not just produce its own treasures like ivory to send south. It also received precious objects from civilizations it never knew, each one a silent messenger from a world away, carried on a current of human curiosity and connection that flowed for thousands of years. The green jade of the tropics traveled north on a current of human hands, but another frozen frontier was preserving its own treasures in the deep cold of the earth. Far to the east, on the vast, windswept grasslands of the Eurasian steppe, a culture of legendary horsemen pushed the boundaries of the known world. These were the Scythians, nomadic warriors and herders who dominated the lands from the Black Sea to the borders of China from around 900 to 200 years before the Common Era. Greek historians like Herodotus wrote of them with a mix of fear and fascination, describing their ferocity in battle and their elaborate rituals. But the Scythian world did not end at the grasslands. It extended its fingers northward into the Siberian taiga forest and the very edges of the tundra. While they were not sailors venturing onto the Arctic Ocean, their presence on the subarctic fringe reveals a stunning mastery of a frozen environment, a story told not in sagas but in ice. The most breathtaking window into this world comes from a series of burial mounds known as kurgans, high in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia. At sites like Pazyryk, the permafrost acted as a perfect time capsule. Tomb builders had intentionally funneled rainwater into the burial chambers where it froze, sealing the contents in a block of solid ice for over 2,000 years. When archaeologists carefully chipped through this ice in the 20th century, they found a preservation so perfect it defied belief. They discovered the bodies of Scythian chieftains and their companions, their skin covered in intricate, swirling tattoos of mythical animals, tattoos that would have been lost to decay in any other climate. They lifted out vibrant felt textiles and lush woolen carpets, their colors still brilliant, depicting processions of horsemen and griffins. They found entire ceremonial carts frozen in place and elaborate headdresses adorned with golden animal figures. These were not the artifacts of a primitive fringe culture, but of a sophisticated and wealthy society with far-reaching trade connections. The presence of Chinese silks and Persian textiles in these Siberian graves proves that the steppe nomads were integral links in a network that spanned continents. The gold itself, worked into stunning depictions of stags and panthers, speaks to a powerful artistic tradition born from the nomadic life, but the true marvel is the ice itself. The Scythians, or the related Pazyryk culture, understood their environment intimately. By engineering their tombs to flood and freeze, they deliberately used the Arctic cold as a tool for eternity, ensuring their elite would be preserved in a state of perpetual grandeur. This was a profound technological and spiritual adaptation to the cold. While these tombs are south of the Arctic Circle, they exist in a landscape defined by permanent frost, a subarctic zone that acts as a gateway to the far north. The Scythian era finds demonstrate that this demanding environment was not a barren no-man's land, but a dynamically inhabited region. Sophisticated cultures thrived here, adapted to the cold, connected to vast trade routes, and capable of creating art and ritual of stunning complexity. The frozen tombs of Siberia give us more than artifacts. They offer a preserved moment, a snapshot of life, death, and belief at the very edge of the ancient Arctic world. They remind us that the story of the North is not just about reaching the pole, but about the rich and varied human cultures that learned to live with the ice, and in doing so, left behind a legacy that the ice faithfully kept for millennia. The frozen tombs of Siberia reveal cultures adapted to the cold, but for a true masterclass in Arctic survival, we must look to a people who never left. For over 2,000 years, the Yupik and Inupiat peoples have thrived in one of the planet's most demanding arenas, the Bering Strait. This narrow channel of water is more than a geographic divide. It is a bustling crossroads, a cultural and biological superhighway linking Asia and North America. Here, exploration was not a single daring voyage, but a continuous, daily practice of life. Their technology was a symphony of innovation perfectly tuned to the ice. The large, open umiak, built from walrus hide stretched over a wooden frame, was the community workhorse capable of transporting entire families and the massive carcass of a bowhead whale. Alongside it, the one-person kayak was a marvel of stealth and precision, allowing a hunter to become a silent part of the seascape. Their hunting tools were equally sophisticated, featuring toggle-headed harpoons that would twist inside a whale's flesh to secure the strike, and complex systems of floats made from inflated seal skins to tire out the largest prey. On land, they built semi-subterranean houses of sod, stone, and whalebone, dug partly into the earth for insulation and anchored against the fierce winds, warmed by the steady glow of seal oil lamps. But these people were far more than just survivors. They were explorers and diplomats of the ice. The Bering Strait was not a barrier to them, but a bridge. They maintained active trade and social networks across its 55 miles, exchanging goods, stories, and marriage partners with relatives on the opposite shore. A Siberian Yupik might trade intricately carved ivory for Alaskan Inupiat obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for cutting tools. This constant, peaceful interaction made them the guardians of a living Arctic knowledge, an archive not written on parchment but carried in language, story, and skill. Their oral histories and intricate place names encode millennia of environmental observation, detailing sea ice conditions, animal migration paths, and the histories of storms and landscapes. This deep, generational intimacy with their world stands in stark contrast to the later European attempts to conquer or colonize the Arctic. Where outsiders saw a harsh emptiness to be overcome, the Yupik and Inupiat saw a rich, knowable home. Their success was not measured in flags planted or territories claimed, but in the enduring continuity of their communities, a testament to a form of exploration that seeks not to discover a new world, but to understand and sustain the one you are profoundly a part of. The Dorset were masters of a silent, frozen world, but their lives were not lived in total isolation. Recent discoveries have shattered that lonely image, revealing a network of connection that spanned the continent. Archaeologists sifting through Dorset sites have uncovered tools and ornaments crafted from materials with impossible origins. They have found small blades and harpoon heads made of a distinctive, pure copper, traceable to the distant Coppermine River region in the central Canadian Arctic, over 1,000 kilometers away from many Dorset settlements. They have recovered carved pendants made from meteoric iron, a material that fell from the sky in only a few known locations in Greenland. They have unearthed fragments of soapstone lamps and cooking pots, the stone itself quarried from specific far-off outcrops. These are not random stones you might find anywhere. These are sourced materials, each with a unique signature, telling a clear story of deliberate acquisition. The Dorset were not just making do with what was at hand, they were seeking out specific, superior resources from incredible distances. This implies something revolutionary, a vast, ancient trade network. Think of it not as a marketplace, but as a slow, patient river of exchange flowing across the tundra. A Dorset hunter from Baffin Island might travel to an annual gathering, a place known for generations where he would meet people from the West. There, he might trade a finely carved ivory seal for a small, precious nugget of Coppermine River copper, a material far easier to shape into a sharp, durable blade than local stone. That copper, once traded, might travel even further east in another exchange, perhaps for a piece of that rare meteoric iron from Greenland, believed to hold the power of the sky. These journeys were not simple errands. They were feats of survival and memory, requiring an intimate knowledge of thousands of miles of coastline, ice conditions, and seasonal meeting places. They required established social protocols, a shared understanding of value, and likely a common sign language or pidgin to bridge dialect gaps. This network moved more than just materials. It carried ideas, a new design for a harpoon head, a story about a spirit creature, a more efficient way to shape soapstone. All these innovations could ripple across the Arctic through the same connections that moved the copper and the iron. The Dorset, then, emerged not as simple, isolated hermits of the ice, but as savvy participants in a continent-spanning system. They possessed a geographic awareness that is staggering, holding a mental map of resources and peoples across a realm Europeans would later deem a trackless wasteland. Their world was connected, communicative, and complex. Their artifacts, traded over such vast distances, rewrite them from mysterious ghosts into networked neighbors, whispering of handshakes and exchanges made in the long Arctic twilight. While the Dorset traded copper across the tundra on the opposite side of the globe, another indigenous culture had mastered the European Arctic for millennia. The Sami, the indigenous people of the northern reaches of Scandinavia and Russia's Kola Peninsula, are Europe's forgotten explorers. Their homeland, which they call Sapmi, is a vast territory of boreal forest, mountain plateau, and tundra stretching across 4 modern nations. Their history here is not one of recent arrival, but of deep, unbroken roots extending back over 5,000 years, making them the continent's oldest surviving Arctic culture. Their exploration was not a quest for new lands, but a profound, cyclical journey woven into the very fabric of their existence, following the ancient migration of the reindeer. This nomadic lifestyle was a masterpiece of adaptation. Sami families moved with the herds across seasonal grazing lands, living in portable tents called lavu, designed to be warm, sturdy, and easily assembled. Their survival depended on an intimate, granular knowledge of the landscape, knowing where the lichen grew thickest under the snow, predicting the weather by the shape of the clouds, and reading the subtle signs of the reindeer's movements. To traverse this snowy realm, they became pioneers of winter travel. The Sami are credited with inventing the earliest practical skis, a technology that transformed the Arctic from an obstacle into a domain they could navigate with speed and grace. They also developed efficient sleds pulled by reindeer or, later, by specially bred dogs, which allowed them to transport their homes and possessions across the frozen expanses. Their spirituality reflected this deep connection, viewing the natural world, the mountains, the winds, the animals as alive with spirit, a sacred network to be respected and sustained. Their relationship with the Norse to the south was complex and often misunderstood. It was not one of conquest, but frequently of pragmatic trade and uneasy coexistence. The Norse needed what the Sami could provide: precious Arctic furs, especially the highly valued pelts of the pine marten and the Arctic fox, along with reindeer products and perhaps even guidance through the treacherous northern terrain. In exchange, the Sami acquired metals, grains, and cloth. Icelandic sagas sometimes mention the Sami, or Finnar as they called them, with a mix of respect and superstition, acknowledging their unique skills in hunting and magic. They were the indispensable experts of the North, the ones who knew the secrets of the land that the Norse farmers and sailors could only glimpse. To frame the Sami as subjects of later Viking exploration is to miss the point entirely. They were the original explorers and permanent residents of the European Arctic. While Norse ships probed the coasts, the Sami moved through the interior, mapping it with their lives. Their exploration was measured not in miles charted, but in generations of sustained life. They thrived in an environment where others could only survive briefly, their knowledge forming a living archive of the Arctic, passed down through songs called joiks, stories, and practical skills. Their enduring presence reminds us that the story of the Arctic is not solely written by those who came to discover it, but by those who always knew it as home. Reports from early Arctic explorers often carried the shock of the unexpected. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as European and American adventurers pushed deeper into the Canadian Arctic, they began sending back bewildering accounts. They described encountering small groups of Inuit with features that did not fit their expectations: light brown or even blonde hair, blue or green eyes, and beards. The explorers dubbed them the Blonde Eskimos, and the name sparked a firestorm of speculation in the popular press and anthropological circles. The most sensational theory was that these people were the living descendants of the lost Norse colonists from Greenland. The idea captured imaginations, suggesting a romantic survival story: a band of Viking settlers who had abandoned their stone houses, intermarried with the Inuit, and been absorbed into the indigenous population, their European legacy visible only in the occasional blonde child. This narrative was appealing, but it was built on a foundation of racial assumptions and a desire for a certain kind of history. It implied that these traits were an anomaly that needed explanation from outside, overlooking the incredible genetic diversity within indigenous populations themselves. For decades, the blonde Eskimo was a staple of adventure novels and pseudoscientific theories, a mystery wrapped in colonial curiosity. The truth, as revealed by modern genetics and archaeology, is far more nuanced and ultimately more interesting. While there is solid evidence that the Norse and Inuit did have contact, it appears to have been very limited. The most tangible clue is a piece of Norse yarn, spun from the hair of a European sheep, found at an Inuit archaeological site in the Canadian Arctic. This small artifact proves trade or scavenging occurred, but it does not prove widespread intermarriage or a lost tribe. Comprehensive DNA studies of modern Inuit populations show no significant, lasting genetic signature from medieval Norse voyagers. So where did the light hair and eyes come from? The answer likely lies in the deep past, long before the Vikings. The ancestors of the Inuit and all indigenous peoples of the Americas migrated from Siberia. The Siberian gene pool itself is ancient and diverse, and traits for lighter hair and eyes were present there thousands of years ago. These genes can resurface occasionally through random genetic recombination, a throwback to that deep ancestral lineage. It is also possible that in the extreme Arctic environment, with its long periods of winter darkness, there could have been a slight evolutionary advantage to lighter pigmentation, aiding in vitamin D synthesis. The blonde Eskimo phenomenon is a powerful lesson in how we interpret the past. It shows how a fleeting, real moment of contact, a trade of yarn for ivory on a frozen shore, can be magnified by later observers into an epic myth that serves their own narratives. Science has gently debunked the lost Viking tribe, but in doing so, it has uncovered a subtler truth. It reveals a history of brief, pragmatic meetings between two very different Arctic cultures, exchanges that left a few material traces but not a sweeping genetic legacy. It reminds us that human history is made of countless such brief encounters, most of which fade without a trace, while a few, seen through a certain lens, become legends we have to carefully unravel. The Umiak was not merely a boat, it was a moving village. Picture a frame not of heavy timber but of driftwood and the strong, curved bones of whales lashed together with sinew. Over this skeleton, artisans would stretch the hides of walrus or bearded seal, carefully sewn with waterproof stitches. The result was a vessel both remarkably buoyant and surprisingly light, capable of riding over waves that would swamp a heavier wooden hull. This was the engineering marvel that powered the Thule world. An Umiak could be up to 30 feet long, a floating platform of life. In a single voyage, it could carry a multi-generational family, their children nestled among bundles of furs, their sled dogs resting on the hides, and all the tools of survival, from soapstone lamps to harpoons. When beached, the skin covering could be removed and repaired, and the lightweight frame dragged ashore with ease. But its true purpose was revealed on the open water, where it became a hunting platform of awesome power. Teams of hunters would paddle these silent giants close to a resting bowhead whale, a creature many times the size of their boat. The strike of a harpoon was not the end, but the beginning of a communal effort as floats were deployed to tire the Leviathan. This technology provided a bounty that fueled an unprecedented human migration. The rapid Thule expansion from Alaska eastward was not a wandering but a purposeful colonization, and the Umiak was its engine. Entire communities would embark following the retreating summer ice. They navigated by a deep knowledge passed through song and story, reading the subtle signs of the ocean itself, the patterns of currents, the flight of seabirds heading toward land, and the position of the sun and stars in the endless summer sky. Their voyages covered thousands of miles of the most treacherous seas on the planet, through fog that could last for days and amidst ice floes that could crush a vessel in moments. They were not just moving from one bay to the next, they were transporting a complete culture, its people, its dogs, its spiritual beliefs, and its way of life across the roof of the world. Each successful landing on a new shore, from the coasts of the Canadian Arctic to the fjords of Greenland, was a triumph of human resilience and ingenuity. This was one of history's greatest maritime explorations, yet it left no written logs or grand monuments, only the enduring presence of a people who had mastered the art of moving through an icy universe, carrying their entire world with them on a frame of wood and skin. The Umiak carried entire cultures across the ice, but centuries later, a very different kind of ship would become trapped by it. In the summer of 1845, two British Royal Navy vessels, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, sailed into the Canadian Arctic with 129 men. Commanded by Sir John Franklin, they were equipped with the pinnacle of 19th century technology, steam engines, reinforced hulls, and a 3-year supply of canned food. They were seeking the elusive Northwest Passage, a maritime shortcut to Asia. Neither the ships nor any of the men were ever seen again by Europeans. The Franklin expedition became one of history's most infamous Arctic tragedies, a story of slow starvation, lead poisoning from poorly soldered cans, and ultimately cannibalism, as revealed by later Inuit accounts and skeletal evidence. It stands as a stark symbol of European failure in the North, but this disaster invites a haunting question. What if Franklin and his men had possessed a different kind of knowledge? What if, instead of relying solely on their canned goods and woolen uniforms, they had understood what the Dorset, the Thule, and the Sami had known for thousands of years? The contrast is profound. Franklin's crews carried tinned meat that would slowly poison them. Ancient Arctic peoples carried the skill to harvest fresh meat from the ice itself. The British sailors wore heavy wool that, when wet, would freeze and sap their body heat. The Inuit wore tailored skins of caribou and seal, which provided superior insulation and shed moisture. When faced with a brutal winter, Franklin's men huddled in their iron-bound ships, slowly dying. The Inuit would have built a warm, temporary home from snow blocks in hours, an igloo that used body heat and a small oil lamp to create a survivable microclimate. The Franklin expedition saw the Arctic as a problem to be overcome with industrial might. The ancient people saw it as a system to be understood and partnered with. Their survival depended on a deep, generational intimacy with the environment, knowing where seals breathed, how sea ice formed, and which plants could prevent scurvy. This was not a conquest, but a conversation. The tragedy of Franklin is not just a tale of bad luck, but a lesson in the limits of technology without wisdom. It underscores the central theme of all these ancient explorations. For millennia, success in the Arctic was never about bringing your world with you and imposing it upon the ice. It was about listening, adapting, and learning the language of the frozen world, a lesson written in survival, not in ship's logs, one that the oldest cultures of the North never needed to be taught. The greatest explorer in Arctic history may have been the weather itself. Climate has never been a static stage for human drama, but a dynamic, often ruthless director, opening doors of opportunity and then slamming them shut with glacial force. Consider the Norse, whose entire North Atlantic saga was written in the ink of a warming trend. The era from around 950 to 1250 of the Common Era, known as the medieval warm period, saw global temperatures rise just enough to tilt the balance in their favor. In the North Atlantic, this meant less sea ice and slightly calmer sailing conditions, allowing their cargo ships to make the perilous crossing to Iceland, Greenland, and beyond with a bit more reliability. More crucially, that extra degree or two of warmth made the impossible seem possible. In Greenland, the growing season lengthened just enough for grass to grow more reliably in the fjords, providing pasture for the cattle and sheep that were the bedrock of their European identity. It was this climatic window, this temporary softening of the Arctic's edge, that made Eric the Red Sail's pitch of Greenland somewhat believable and allowed those fragile settlements to take root. The warmer waters and reduced ice may have even helped Leif Erikson's crew as they probed westward, eventually finding the timber-rich shores they called Vinland. For a few centuries, the climate was their silent partner. Then the partner turned. Beginning in the 13th century, the world began to cool into what we now call the Little Ice Age. This was not an instant freeze, but a creeping, centuries-long chill that tightened its grip on the North Atlantic. Summers grew shorter and cooler, winters longer and more brutal. Glaciers in Greenland began to advance, swallowing up pastureland. The sea ice returned with a vengeance, lingering longer each year, blocking the crucial shipping lanes from Norway for months at a time. The Norse, clinging to their pastoral lifestyle, were now farming on land that was slowly failing them. Their hay yields dropped, their livestock grew thinner, and the vital trade that brought iron and timber became sporadic and then nearly ceased. The climate window that had opened so invitingly was now closing, and the Norse in Greenland, particularly in the vulnerable western settlement, were on the wrong side of it. The Little Ice Age did not act alone in their demise, but it stacked the deck overwhelmingly against them, amplifying every other weakness in their society, from economic isolation to potential conflict. Where they saw a home, the changing climate saw an experiment it was no longer willing to fund. This pattern of climatic invitation and eviction is a repeating rhythm throughout the deep Arctic past. Long before the Norse, similar shifts may have guided the movements of the very first peoples. The retreat of the massive ice sheets at the end of the last glacial period, around 16,000 years ago, opened entire new continents for exploration, creating the coastal kelp highways and interior corridors that the ancestors of indigenous peoples followed. A later period of cooling might have made the Bering Land Bridge more hospitable for movement, while a warming period and rising seas later submerged it, cutting off the continents. In the Eurasian Arctic, warmer phases could have allowed the Scythian-era cultures to push their hunting grounds further north, while cold snaps would have contracted the habitable zone. Climate change, therefore, is the oldest and most powerful explorer of all. It does not carry a harpoon or sail a ship, but it redraws the maps, redefines what is possible, and presents humanity with a simple, brutal choice: adapt, move, or perish. The history of the ancient Arctic is in many ways a chronicle of our species reading those environmental cues, catching the right climatic current, and sometimes, tragically, missing the signs that the current was about to change direction forever. A story told by the fire can be as accurate as a map drawn on parchment. For the peoples of the Arctic, where the landscape itself is a shifting, living entity, the most vital records of exploration were never written down. They were carried in memory, passed from elder to child through rich and rigorous oral traditions. These are not mere folktales, but sophisticated systems of knowledge preservation, containing detailed geographical data, histories of epic migrations, and precise descriptions of environments from centuries past. The Inuit, for instance, have stories that describe coastlines now lost beneath the sea. These narratives speak of traveling to islands, hunting on peninsulas, and living in places that today are completely submerged. Geologists and archaeologists have confirmed that these descriptions match the shape of the land when sea levels were significantly lower, thousands of years ago. The stories remember a world that vanished long before the first European ship arrived, preserving a map of a drowned continent in verse and anecdote. Similarly, the Inuit tales of the Tuniat, the gentle giants who preceded them, are not fantasy. They are historical accounts maintaining a cultural memory of the Dorset people, describing their tools, their quiet nature, and their eventual fading from the land. These oral histories provide context and humanity to the silent stone tools and ivory carvings we find, telling us not just what the Dorset used, but how they were perceived by those who came after. Across the Atlantic, the Sami joik's traditional songs are not simply music. Each joik is a sonic portrait, a complex composition dedicated to a person, an animal, or a specific mountain, river, or valley. To joik a place is to recall its essence, its history, and its role in the network of life. A Sami traveler hearing a joik of a distant lake would understand its location, its character, and perhaps even stories of events that transpired there. This oral tradition functioned as a living, sung atlas guiding movement across the trackless tundra. To dismiss these narratives as myth is to ignore a fundamental truth about human exploration. Before the compass and the logbook, there was the story. Oral histories encode survival information: where to find fresh water in a storm, which valley shelters the caribou herd in a hard winter, how the ice forms safely on a particular bay. They are validated by their utility. If a story gave bad directions, it would not survive for generations. These stories are exploration records in the truest sense, chronicles of who went where, what they found, and how they adapted. They preserve a timeline of human movement, encounter, and resilience that physical archaeology can only hint at. A piece of pottery tells us people were there. A story tells us why they came, how they felt, and what they learned. They are the living breath of history, reminding us that the deepest maps are not carved in stone, but etched into the human heart, carried forward on the tide of a well-told tale. A weathered slab of gray stone, pulled from the roots of a Minnesota poplar tree in 1898, seemed to rewrite history overnight. Carved into its face was a message in runes, the ancient Norse alphabet. It told a desperate tale of 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland, who camped by 2 rocky islands one day's travel north of this stone. The inscription ended with a chilling line stating 10 men were red with blood and dead, and was dated 1362. This was the Kensington runestone, and its discovery sent shockwaves through a community eager for roots. For Scandinavian immigrants in the American Midwest, here was breathtaking proof that their ancestors had not only reached America, but had penetrated deep into the continent to the very heartland centuries before Columbus. The stone was celebrated, displayed, and for many believed without question. It fit a powerful narrative, a tangible connection to a glorious Viking past right in their new backyard. But the world of academia was not so easily convinced. As linguists and archaeologists scrutinized the inscription, the story began to unravel. The runes themselves were a strange hybrid, mixing forms from different centuries and regions in ways no genuine medieval carver would ever use. The language was even more damning. It was not Old Norse but a modern Scandinavian dialect peppered with English-sounding words and grammatical constructions that simply did not exist in the 14th century. It was as if someone had written a letter claiming to be from Shakespeare's time, but used phrases like okay and gonna. The physical evidence on the stone was equally telling. Expert analysis showed the carved grooves were sharp and unweathered compared to the stone's surface, and the cuts were made with modern tools, not the chisels a Norse explorer would have carried. The context of its discovery was the final clue. It was found not in a sealed archaeological layer, but by a Swedish immigrant farmer, Olof Oman, in an area recently settled by Scandinavians during a period of intense national romanticism, when Viking heritage was a source of immense pride. The Kensington runestone is almost certainly a hoax, a creation of the late 19th century. Yet dismissing it as a simple forgery misses its profound importance. The stone is a perfect teaching moment, a cautionary tale written in stone. It reveals how our powerful desire to find ancient explorers, to connect ourselves to a dramatic past, can sometimes outpace the evidence. We want the story to be true so much that we overlook the glaring inconsistencies. This is why rigorous scientific archaeology is non-negotiable. Contrast the Kensington stone with the site at Elance Ox Meadows. There, the evidence was not a single, sensational object, but a pattern of evidence, foundations of houses built in a specific style, a smithy with slag, artifacts of daily life, all found in a context that made sense. It was painstaking, unglamorous work that built a solid, undeniable case. The Kensington story, on the other hand, was a lone artifact begging for a grand narrative. It serves as a critical reminder in the search for pre-Viking exploration. The field is already filled with genuine, breathtaking mysteries, from Dorset trade networks to possible Polynesian contact. To clutter it with debunked hoaxes only makes it harder to see the real, subtle truths waiting in the ice and soil. The stone's true lesson is about intellectual honesty, about the discipline to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads away from the most romantic and appealing story. The runestone's lesson in skepticism is vital, for today, the Arctic itself is surrendering secrets not through hoaxes but through a profound and alarming transformation. As the planet warms, the ancient ice that has long preserved the past is now retreating, revealing a frozen archive of human history that is both breathtaking and heartbreaking. This is a new kind of exploration, driven not by ships but by science and by a desperate race against time. Across the Arctic, from the mountains of Norway to the high passes of the Yukon, permanent ice patches and permafrost are melting at an unprecedented rate. For thousands of years, these frozen repositories have acted as perfect time capsules. A hunter might lose a dart in a snowbank 8,000 years ago. That snow would compact into ice, sealing the artifact in a deep freeze, protecting it from the bacteria and elements that would have destroyed it anywhere else. Now, as that ice melts for the first time in millennia, these objects are tumbling out onto the rocky ground, exposed to sun, rain, and decay. Archaeologists are becoming the new Arctic explorers, hiking into remote alpine areas where ice has persisted for centuries, only to find it shrinking before their eyes. Their discoveries are rewriting chapters of human history. In the Yukon's Tachanshiny Alsek Park, melting ice patches have yielded a treasure trove of ancient hunting gear. Researchers have recovered perfectly preserved atlatl darts, the spear-throwing tools that predate the bow and arrow, their wooden shafts and sinew bindings intact. They have found arrows fletched with feathers, their stone points still lashed tightly with caribou sinew. In the mountains of Norway, similar ice patches have given up Iron Age woolen tunics, leather shoes, and even the remains of sleds, offering an intimate look at daily life in the Scandinavian highlands 2,000 years ago. In Alaska, thawing permafrost is revealing sites like the Rising Whale, where archaeologists uncovered artifacts suggesting a trading post between Inuit from Alaska and Yupik from Siberia, a tangible link across the Bering Strait. The preservation is often so remarkable it rivals that of Ötzi the Iceman, the famous Neolithic traveler found in the Alps. An Arctic Ötzi could offer more than just tools. It could offer a person with clothing, stomach contents, tattoos, and DNA, providing an unimaginably complete snapshot of an individual's life, health, diet, and travels in the ancient North. But this scientific windfall comes with a cruel deadline. Once an artifact emerges from the ice, its clock starts ticking rapidly. Organic materials that survived for 5,000 years in a frozen state can rot away in a single season. A piece of ancient leather exposed to the air can shrivel and disintegrate in weeks. This has launched an urgent global salvage operation. Modern archaeologists are using every tool at their disposal to win this race. They analyze satellite imagery to monitor ice melt and predict where new patches might reveal artifacts. They employ drones to survey vast, rugged areas that would take teams weeks to cover on foot. When they find something, the recovery is a meticulous process of documentation and immediate stabilization. A wooden arrow shaft must be kept wet, a piece of fur must be frozen again, all to pause the decay that has already begun. Back in labs, scientists use advanced DNA analysis on artifacts, not just to identify the species of animal used for a sinew thread, but to trace population movements and genetic lineages. They study microscopic pollen grains trapped in the fletching of an arrow to reconstruct the ancient environment the hunter moved through. Each recovered object is a single pixel in a vast, emerging picture. The story these melting treasures tell is one of incredible continuity and adaptation. They show that the high mountain passes, now considered remote and barren, were once bustling highways for hunters pursuing caribou and other game. They prove that the technologies we see in fragments at lower elevations were sophisticated and refined. They confirm the oral histories of indigenous peoples, providing physical proof of ancient journeys and hunting practices. This new frontier of exploration is bittersweet. Every dart point pulled from the mud is a data point that enriches our understanding of human resilience, yet its emergence is a direct symptom of a planet in crisis. The archaeologists working in these melting landscapes are explorers in the truest sense, but they are also archivists of a vanishing world, racing to preserve the physical memory of the Arctic's long human story before the very ice that guarded it disappears forever. The ice has spoken, and its story is far richer than any single legend. We have traveled from the speculative shores of the Solutrean hypothesis, where Ice Age hunters might have glimpsed a new world from skin boats, to the definitive stone foundations of a Norse camp at Elant's Ox Meadows. We met the Dorset, the gentle Tuniat who thrived in silent mastery of the seal hole hunt for nearly 2,000 years, their delicate carvings and continent-spanning trade networks revealing a world of profound sophistication. We witnessed the explosive Thule expansion, a migration powered by the Umiak and the bowhead whale that reshaped the human map of the Arctic in a few short centuries. We followed threads of connection that defy modern maps, where Zenu gold from Colombia and Olmec jade from Guatemala found their way to the frozen north through ancient, patient hands. We saw the Arctic not as a blank space, but as a living, connected crossroads. The Vikings, for all their daring, were not the first to challenge this realm. They were latecomers to a stage where human ingenuity had been performing acts of survival and exploration for millennia. The true narrative of the Arctic is not one of discovery, but of continuous habitation, a deep and enduring conversation between people and the most extreme environment on Earth. It is a story written in walrus ivory, etched into permafrost, and sung in the joiks of the Sami. It reminds us that history's most epic tales are not always about conquest, but often about adaptation, about learning the subtle language of a frozen world and finding a way to call it home. So we leave you with this question: what ancient mystery from the frozen past captures your imagination the most? Was it the silent disappearance of the Dorset, the impossible journey of a piece of tropical gold, or the fleeting meeting of Norse and Inuit on a windswept shore? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to journey with us as we continue to uncover history's greatest secrets, hidden not in jungles or deserts but in the eternal